You finally have what you wanted. The chaos has stopped. The noise has quieted. And yet, in that silence, you feel something unfamiliar rising inside you. Not gratitude, not relief, something closer to panic. Within days, sometimes hours, you find yourself reaching for conflict again, creating problems where none existed, picking fights, abandoning routines, destroying what you built. You tell yourself it's circumstance, bad luck, other people. But if you're honest, truly honest, you'll notice a pattern. Every time peace arrives, you're the one who shatters it. The psychologist Carl Jung spent decades studying why human beings repeat their own suffering. He called it the shadow, the part of ourselves we refuse to see. But there's something even more specific happening when we sabotage peace. It's not just self-destruction. It's something far more calculated, far more unconscious. We are not afraid of failure. We are afraid of the emptiness that comes with having nothing left to fight. Because if the war ends, we are forced to confront the one thing we've been running from all along: ourselves. Chapter 1. The Addiction to Chaos. Marcus grew up in a home where silence meant something terrible was about to happen. His father's anger was loud and violent, but the quiet before it was worse. That's when Marcus learned to read the tension in the air, to prepare, to survive. By the time he was 8, he could predict an explosion by the way his father's jaw tightened or his mother avoided eye contact. Chaos became his teacher. Peace became a warning sign. He carried this into adulthood without realizing it. In his 20s, Marcus built a successful business. He worked obsessively, slept little, thrived in crisis. When a deal fell through, he felt alive. When a client complained, he felt focused. But when things were going well, when the month closed smoothly and his team needed nothing from him, he would sit at his desk and feel a creeping dread. Within a week, he'd pick a fight with his business partner over something trivial. He'd change a system that was working. He'd create urgency where none was needed. And when the chaos returned, so did his sense of purpose. This is not weakness, it's conditioning. The nervous system learns to associate survival with stress. When you grow up in an environment where calm is the exception and crisis is the rule, your body begins to treat peace as dangerous. The psychoanalyst Donald Winnicott wrote about this paradox. He said that for some people, the breakdown they fear has already happened. They are not preparing for disaster. They are trying to return to the only emotional state that feels familiar. Marcus wasn't sabotaging success. He was trying to go home. Chapter 2. The Identity Crisis of Contentment. There is a particular kind of person who defines themselves by what they overcome. The fighter, the survivor, the one who never quits. They build an identity around endurance, resilience, struggle, and that identity becomes sacred. It becomes who they are. But identity is a trap, because if you are the person who survives the storm, what happens when the storm ends? Who are you in the calm? Marcus couldn't answer that question. He didn't know how to be a man at peace. His entire self-concept was built on adversity. He was the kid who made it out, the entrepreneur who bet everything and won, the guy who didn't need anyone's help. These were not just stories. They were the architecture of his sense of self. And when peace arrived, that architecture began to crack. He would wake up in the morning with no fires to put out and feel a profound disorientation. Not boredom, not laziness, a kind of existential vertigo, as though he had lost his coordinates. The existential psychologist Rollo May wrote that anxiety is not the fear of death, but the fear of non-being. It is the terror of realizing you do not know who you are without your defenses. For Marcus, struggle was a defense. It gave him structure, meaning, a role to play. Without it, he was faced with a question he had been avoiding his entire life. If I am not fighting, what am I doing? If I am not in motion, do I exist at all? This is why people destroy good relationships, why they quit jobs that finally feel stable, why they relapse into old patterns the moment things start working. It's not that they don't want peace, it's that peace demands a confrontation with the self. And the self, when you haven't met it in years, is a stranger you're not sure you'll like. Chapter 3. The Unconscious Loyalty to Pain. There is something else happening beneath the surface, something even more insidious. Marcus was not just addicted to chaos. He was loyal to it. Loyal in the way a soldier is loyal to a war that shaped him. Loyal in the way a child is loyal to a parent, even an abusive one. Because pain, when it is consistent, becomes a kind of love. It becomes the only thing you can trust. Sigmund Freud called this the repetition compulsion, the unconscious drive to recreate the conditions of our original wound, not because we enjoy suffering, but because we are trying to master it. We return to the scene of the crime again and again, hoping this time we will get it right. This time we will fix it. But we never do, because the wound is not out there. It's inside. And no amount of external chaos will resolve an internal conflict. Marcus's father never apologized, never changed, never gave Marcus the closure he needed. So Marcus spent his adult life creating situations where he could prove he didn't need it. He would start fights he could win. He would create chaos he could control. He was replaying his childhood, but this time he was the one in charge. Except he wasn't. The script was still the same. The outcome was still the same. He was still the boy waiting for peace he believed he didn't deserve. This is the cruelest form of self-sabotage. It is not random. It is precise. The people we hurt are often the ones who offer us what we never had. The opportunities we destroy are the ones that would require us to believe we are worthy. We sabotage peace because peace would mean betraying the past. It would mean admitting that the people who hurt us were wrong, and for reasons we don't fully understand, that feels like a loss. Chapter 4. The Fear of the Formless. One night, after months of relative stability, Marcus sat alone in his apartment and felt something he hadn't felt in years. Nothing, not sadness, not anxiety, just a vast, empty silence. No urgent emails, no crises, no one needing him. And in that silence, he realized something that terrified him more than failure ever had. He didn't know what he wanted. The philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre wrote that we are condemned to be free, that freedom is not liberation, but a burden. Because with freedom comes the responsibility to choose, and choice requires knowing who you are and what matters to you. For people like Marcus, who have spent their lives reacting, surviving, adapting, the absence of crisis is not a gift. It is a void, a formless space where they must now create meaning from nothing. This is the deeper terror beneath self-sabotage. It is not the fear of peace. It is the fear of what peace reveals, that you have been so busy running, you forgot where you were going, that you have been so focused on surviving, you never learned how to live, that the life you built, the identity you defended, was never yours. It was a response, a reaction, a defense mechanism dressed up as a personality. Marcus realized he didn't know what he liked, what brought him joy, what he would do with a free afternoon if no one was counting on him. These sound like small questions, but they are not. They are the questions that reveal whether you are living your life or performing it. And for Marcus, the answer was unbearable. He had been performing for so long, he didn't know if there was anything underneath. Chapter 5. The Discipline of Stillness. The shift began not with action, but with surrender. Marcus stopped trying to fix the emptiness. He stopped creating chaos to fill it. He sat with it. He let it be. And in that stillness, something unexpected happened. The noise in his mind began to quiet. Not all at once, not permanently, but enough for him to hear something he had been drowning out his entire life. His own voice. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus taught that we suffer not from events, but from our judgments about them. Marcus had been judging peace as dangerous, emptiness as failure, stillness as weakness. But those were not truths. They were beliefs. And beliefs can be examined. He began to ask different questions. Not what do I need to do, but what do I need to stop doing? Not how do I fill this space, but what is this space trying to show me? He started small. He stopped checking his phone first thing in the morning. He stopped filling every silence with a podcast or music. He took walks without a destination. He sat in his apartment without turning on the television. These were not grand gestures. They were acts of defiance against a lifetime of avoidance. And they were harder than anything he had ever done, because they required him to be present, to be still, to be with himself. At first, the discomfort was overwhelming. His body wanted to move. His mind wanted to plan. His hands wanted to reach for distraction, but he didn't. He breathed. He waited. He let the discomfort exist without trying to solve it. And slowly, over weeks, then months, the discomfort began to shift. It didn't disappear, but it became less threatening. It became something he could coexist with. And in that coexistence, he found something he hadn't expected. Space. Chapter 6. The reconstruction of self-peace. When you finally stop fighting it, is not the absence of struggle. It is the presence of clarity. Marcus began to see with uncomfortable precision the patterns he had been repeating, the relationships he had sabotaged because they required vulnerability, the opportunities he had walked away from because they required him to believe in his own worth, the version of himself he had been defending, not because it was true but because it was familiar. The psychologist Carl Rogers wrote that the curious paradox is that when I accept myself just as I am, then I can change. Marcus had spent his life trying to change by force, by willpower, by discipline. But real change, the kind that lasts, requires something else. It requires acceptance, not of the behavior, but of the wound beneath it. He had to accept that he had been hurt, that he had learned to survive in ways that no longer served him, that the strategies that saved him as a child were now the chains that bound him. He began to rebuild slowly, from the inside out, not by becoming someone new, but by unbecoming who he never was. He let go of the identity of the fighter, not because he was weak, but because he no longer needed to prove his strength. He let go of the need for chaos, not because he had conquered it, but because he had understood it. He let go of the loyalty to pain, not because he had healed, but because he had chosen something else. This is the work that no one talks about, the work that happens in silence, the work of sitting with yourself and deciding consciously who you want to be, not who you were trained to be, not who you had to be to survive, but who you choose to be now, in this moment, with full knowledge of your past and full agency over your future. It is not a single decision. It is 1,000 small decisions made every day, in the quiet moments when no one is watching. Chapter 7. The Peace You Can Hold. There came a day when Marcus woke up and felt nothing unusual. No dread, no urgency, no need to create a problem. Just a quiet morning. He made coffee. He sat by the window. He watched the light change. And for the first time in his life, he didn't feel like he was waiting for something to go wrong. He wasn't bracing. He wasn't preparing. He was just there, present, still, at peace. This is not the peace of achievement. It is not the peace that comes from having everything you want. It is the peace that comes from no longer needing chaos to feel alive. It is the peace that comes from knowing yourself well enough that silence is no longer a threat. It is the peace that comes from understanding that you are not what you overcome. You are what you choose again and again in the smallest moments. Marcus still struggles. He still feels the pull toward old patterns. But now he recognizes it. He feels the impulse to sabotage and he pauses. He asks himself what he's afraid of. He sits with the discomfort instead of acting on it, and most days that is enough. Not because he has mastered himself, but because he has stopped trying to. He has accepted that he is a work in progress. That peace is not a destination, it is a practice, a discipline, a choice you make over and over until it becomes who you are. The philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche wrote that he who has a why to live can bear almost any how. Marcus finally found his why, not in struggle, not in survival, but in the quiet, unglamorous work of being present with himself, of building a life that doesn't need to be destroyed to feel real, of choosing peace, not because it's easy, but because it's true. You will sabotage your own peace until you understand what you're afraid it will reveal. You will destroy what you build until you stop believing that struggle is the only proof of your worth. You will run from stillness until you realize that stillness is not emptiness. It is clarity. And clarity, though it may terrify you, is the only thing that will set you free. The war is over. The question now is whether you have the courage to lay down your weapons and see who you are without them.